Hello everyone and welcome to the discussion video of UPSC GS Paper 3 Mains 2022. We would start with the discussion of first question of the question paper. The first question was, why is public-private partnership required in infrastructural projects? Examine the role of public-private partnership model in the redevelopment of railway stations in India. And we had to answer this question in 150 words, which means that the content that we have to write in this answer has to be absolutely precise because there are word limitations. 150 words means that preciseness level has to be absolutely good. So let us try to understand different components of the answer which we have to focus in this question. So this question says, why is public-private partnership required for infrastructural projects? Now you are writing the exam for Indian civil services, which means this question has been asked in the context of India. So we will write, and because the next question also says, examine the role of public-private partnership model in the redevelopment of railway stations. So India is a country which is unique in many sense. For example, population is huge, requirement of infrastructure is huge. We are an aspirational country where the number of urban places in India, urbanization is increasing. Unlike Western countries, our urbanization level has not saturated. We are still trying to become urban. At the same time, we have to take care of rural aspirations also. We are a low middle income country. So huge population, low middle income country, aspirational country, which means that in that context, we have to answer the question that what is the requirement of public-private partnership if you are trying to give infrastructure to such a diverse country. And next question says, examine the role of public-private partnership model in the redevelopment of railway station. So India is trying to redevelop its railway station. It's always in the news. You would have heard in the news that we have already redeveloped Habibganj railway station. Now it is called as Rani Kamlapati, Ahmedabad, New Delhi, Mumbai. All these railway stations are in the process of being redeveloped. So in that context, this question is very current oriented. Let us see how to answer this question. Now, to write the answer of this question, we would start with the introduction. Now, what are we going to write in the introduction? In the introduction, we will write that India is following infrastructure-led growth model. What is infrastructure-led growth model? So, what is happening in India these days? Government of India is saying that to promote agriculture, industry and services, these three things, Government of India is saying we will create infrastructure, basic infrastructure like roads, electricity, water, waste management, irrigation system. So Government of India is saying that to promote or to develop agricultural sector, industrial sector and service sector, our approach will be to provide them basic infrastructure. With basic infrastructure, agriculture, industry and service sector will develop. This is our model. This is infrastructure-led growth model, which means our focus is going to be on the creation of infrastructures for these sectors. To create infrastructure for these sectors, the Government of India had started a plan called as National Infrastructure Pipeline. Pipeline means the list of infrastructure that we are trying to create in this country in different sectors. So our target is that between 2020 to 2025, we are going to spend roughly 100 lakh crore rupees in the construction of infrastructure so that our agriculture, industry and services would develop. Now, this is a humongous amount. 100 lakh crore is a humongous amount. How to bring 100 lakh crores? So the Government of India is saying that there are multiple sources of finance. One would be central government, another would be state government. This one is called as public-private partnership, which means through public-private partnership, where private sector will give the money, we are also going to finance this 100 lakh crore. This should be the introduction. So in introduction, UPSC would look for words like this: infrastructure-led growth model, national infrastructure pipeline and sources of finance. This should be the introduction, because introduction directly hits the point that because we have to increase our growth through infrastructure, and to create infrastructure we need sources of finance, and public-private partnership directly fits here. Now, In the body of the answer, we are going to write the relevance or requirement of public-private partnership in infrastructure. See why? Because UPSC has asked this question. Why is public-private partnership required in infrastructural projects? So we are going to answer that question. Why do we require it? Number one, see, I told you that India is a low middle income country. In middle income category, we are on the lower side. China is high middle income. We are low middle income. Which means since we are low middle income country, our manufacturing base is less. Economic activities wise, we are still low. Because of that, the tax revenue and the non-tax revenue sources of government of India is extremely limited. So we need the help of private sector so that they can come and provide us finance. So it is not because we have some extra love for private sector, but it is because of compulsion that we have to bring in the private sector because there is budget constraint. Now, second point is rapid urbanization. You see, unlike the Western countries, India is a growing economy, which means the speed of urbanization is still peaking up. And in days to come, years to come, our rate of urbanizations will increase even further. Whenever we create rapid urbanization, there are few requirements. For example, hospitals, school, waste management, drainage system, community centers, urban housing, these are urban transportation system, urban communication system, urban power distribution. These are the things that we are going to require. And for all these things, we require fund. And for fund, we require private sector. Similarly, we also have to take care of our rural areas. Rural areas have also become aspirational. So we have to provide basic facilities to rural area also. And for that, again, we require funds. Now, infrastructure has a beautiful contribution for the society and economy. See how? If we create infrastructure projects like road, it's a one-time investment if you construct a road. But the moment we construct a road, it gives a push to other economic activities. Like, for example, if you connect a village with a mandi, a market, farmers can take their crops. Similarly, from mandi, crops can be exported to other countries. Crops can be sold to places like big bazaars. So if we invest a small amount in infrastructure, it leads to huge increase in the GDP of India. So little increase in infrastructure, huge increase in GDP. This is called as multiplier effect. Similarly, if we construct a road, if we give water facilities, electricity, automatically industries will develop. This is called as crowding in effect. If we construct a road to connect a village with a market, people will not only use the road to go to market, but people will also use the road to go to schools and hospitals. This is called as positive externality. When you create an infrastructure for one purpose, but some other benefits also happen along with that, that is called positive externality. Plus, if you create infrastructure, it will lead to employment. But to create infrastructure, we do not have sufficient funds, so we need the help of private sector. So if we create public-private partnership, all these effects, multiplier effect, crowding in effect, positive externality and employment effect, these things will help India to grow further. With these things, inclusive growth will also happen. And for that, you need public-private partnership. Similarly, it has been seen, and this is a very interesting point, guys. It has been observed that whenever we involve public-private partnership, whether in India or abroad, the tendency of the public-private partnership is to bring new technology. And you know why they bring new technology? Not because they are doing charity for India. Public-private partnership brings new technology to India because with new technology, the cost of production goes down. And the private sector will be able to get more profit margins. That is why they bring new technology. But it is good for India, no? So for example, suppose a road has to be constructed. If it is constructed entirely by Government of India, we will call it as government project. But if the building of the road plus financing of the road is done by private sector, these two things done by private sector, and the land belongs to the government. So government plus private is called public-private partnership. So whenever you give the responsibility of construction to private sector, they have a tendency to bring new technology to reduce the cost of production. So we will get technology as well, and we will be able to produce the things at lower price also. Similarly, guys, it has been observed that whenever a private sector starts to construct infrastructure like road across the world, this is a global data, that whenever private sector is involved in the infrastructure creation, it has been seen that around 75% of PPP projects, around 75% of PPP projects globally, they are completed before time or perfectly on time. So if we have to construct this road, for example, in 1 year, and if you give it to private sector for construction, in 75% of the cases, the probability is 75% that the road will be constructed either before time or perfectly on time. So if you involve private sector in infrastructure, these are the things that India is going to benefit from. Because we don't have much budget, we don't have much revenue. So with the help of private sector, this problem of budget constraint can be solved. Similarly, rapid urbanization, rural development, and these infrastructure requirements can be met. So this is the relevance of public-private partnership in India. Now, next part of the question said that examine the role of public-private partnership model in redevelopment of railway stations. So look at this, guys. See, this is Habibganj. This is the old railway station. Now this railway station has been redeveloped and this is how the station looks like. So this is now called as Rani Kamlapati. Earlier it was Habibganj. This is station redevelopment program. Now let me tell you what is a station redevelopment. See, guys. To write the answer of this part, that what is the role of public-private partnership in redevelopment of railway station, we should start the answer by saying that in India, the government of India is following National Rail Plan 2030. Under National Rail Plan, government of India is trying to create capacity in the Indian railway so that it can help in the movement of goods and movement of people both. If you want more people and more goods to move through railway, we have to provide more number of trains and we also have to provide better railway stations. To provide more trains and better railway stations, the government of India has said that they will involve private sector. So under National Rail Plan itself, it is mentioned that we will use public-private partnership in railway for three purposes. First is to run private trains in India. So government has decided to allow private sector to buy their own trains as per government standard. They can buy the trains and they will run the train on designated routes. This is called as private train. The government of, and whenever private trains are run, government of India will collect a small part of profit from them. Similarly, the second program under public-private partnership of railway is private freight terminal. What is private freight terminal? So you would have observed that whenever we look at railway station, see, this was the old railway station. So in and around railway station, you would find a lot of vacant area. So the government of India gives the vacant area like this. Government of India gives the vacant area like this around railway station to private sector. And private sector can create a warehouse and government will collect rent from them. This is called as private freight terminal. So this is the second program which government of India is running. Government gives vacant railway land to private sector. Private sector creates warehouses and government collects rent. So guys, please focus. Here, through private train and private freight terminal, government of India collects some money. This money collected is used in the redevelopment of railway station from here to here. So because if you redevelop the railway station like this into this, you need cash. That cash the government of India arranges through private trains and private freight terminal, and this will fund our station redevelopment program. This is the long-term planning of the government of India. This is called as station redevelopment program under public-private partnership. Now, what are some of the details of it? Let's see. Now, to write station redevelopment program and what is the relevance of public-private partnership, we would start the answer by saying that under national infrastructure pipeline, see, whenever you get a question related to infrastructure, make sure that you write this point for sure in the answer. So under national infrastructure pipeline, the government of India has decided to spend roughly 1 lakh crore rupees to redevelop 400 railway stations through public-private partnership. So we will pick 400 railway stations and roughly the expenditure will be 1 lakh crore, and we are trying to develop the railway stations just like we have done with Habibganj to Rani Kamlapati. Now, who is helping all these things? And in Ministry of Railway, there is a statutory body called as Rail Land Development Authority. They are the ones who are in charge of public-private partnership station redevelopment program. What is the model of station redevelopment program? See, under station redevelopment program, what is the model? The model is Government of India takes old railway station like this. Look here please, Government of India takes this railway station, we will remove this, we will give this piece of land to private sector for 30 to 45 years. The private sector will have to build this, the private sector will have to finance this, and the private sector will have to operate and maintain this for next 30 to 45 years. And after 30 to 45 years, the private sector will return this facility to Government of India. So the owner is the Government of India, the private sector is only the caretaker for 30 to 45 years. Now, whatever fee is collected from public, so if you come to these railway stations, for everything you have to pay a fee. Like if you go in cafe, if you use the railway station, you have to pay a fee, passenger fee. A part of the passenger fee goes to private sector, a part of the passenger fee goes to government. Both make profit. So what are we doing under this? So the model is private sector gets it for 30 to 45 years, build, operate, transfer. This is the model which is being currently used in the station redevelopment program. What are the two components of station redevelopment program? This is very crucial because UPSC would look for this point. So the two components of station redevelopment program are development of station infrastructure and commercial development. I'll tell you what this is. Look, if you look carefully, this is Habibganj. Look at the infrastructure. So this is the commercial center and this is passengers area. If you look carefully at the passenger area, we are giving world-class facilities to the passengers so that there is good waiting area, good lounge, cafeteria. These are passenger washrooms, etc., drinking water. These are passenger air conditioner, passenger facilities. And this is commercial center, commercial center also. So, for example, a floor of this building, railway station, will be given to hotels, a floor will be given to shopping centers, cafe, restaurant, and Government of India will get a lot of revenue by giving these places on rent for commercial activities. And whatever rent Government of India collects from these commercial activities, Government of India will use that rent to provide facilities to the passengers. So rent is collected through commercial activities and the money is used to provide amenities to the passengers. So these are the two things that we need. See, look at the two components of station redevelopment program. First is station infrastructure, second is commercial activity. I told you, commercial activities provide a lot of cash to the government. That cash is used to provide world-class amenities to passengers, smooth hassle-free travel, separate arrival and departure area for trains, road connectivity is there near the railway station, and security is good. To provide all these things, the government uses the commercial activities which is happening in the railway station. Government collects cash from them like restaurant, hotel, etc. and uses it to provide station infrastructure to people. This is the answer which you have to write. In this answer, you can conclude by saying that public-private partnership model is a good model because it helps us to get good quality infrastructure in particular time frame. But there are some challenges, like in India, we don't have an independent regulator of public-private partnership models. So we badly need a regulator for public-private partnership models, and we should also make sure that by involving private sectors, we should keep a check on the prices that the passengers have to pay. We should not make the railway station and the ticket prices so costly that it becomes out of reach of customers in India, because we are not a very rich country. So regulation of public-private partnership has to be good. We need a regulator. Number two, the financial burden should not be shifted too much on the passengers. And plus third, there must be constant quality check for next 30 to 45 years so that the private sector provides us good quality services. So these are the things that we should write in this question.
Good morning, everyone. So now we are discussing paper 3 mains question paper. There are 3 questions which I'll be discussing with you, and the remaining ones separately. So let's begin. The first one that we have here is related to inclusive growth. This was question number 2, by the way. The question number 2 in paper 3. Let's read the question carefully. It says, is inclusive growth possible under market economy? Okay, and then state the significance of financial inclusion in achieving economic growth in India. The question has two parts, and this, I would say, is one of the questions where there is a lot of scope of writing. Okay, you can actually write something like an essay on this kind of a question, and in some of the explanation videos you will actually see explanation like an essay, a very long one. But the discussion that I am doing here is not just to tell you whatever you can write, but what you need to write in the limited time period in the examination hall. It is not something about talking about each and every feature of it. So when you are sitting in the examination hall, the first important thing is read question very carefully, because it is possible that you have something in mind and you write something which is not required as much as the question was asking about. So the question first part, and this is 150 words, so I have to be very, very careful about the timing, the word limits also. Is inclusive growth possible under market economy? So you need to begin with definition of inclusive growth and market economy, but very briefly, not more than one sentence in general. And then you should be talking about how can the two concepts may be in tandem and how can they be against each other. Let's begin with inclusive growth, and then we'll be coming to the other part of the question. So coming back, this is question number 3, question number 2, paper number 3. So let's begin with inclusive growth. Actually, inclusive growth is slightly subjective term, and everyone has their own way of defining it. As long as they keep a few things in mind, it doesn't matter exactly how do you define it. So in one of the most acceptable definition, you can say inclusive growth refers to economic growth that is associated with a few other things. For example, fair distribution of income. Then fair distribution of merit goods. Some common examples can be education, healthcare, etc., as well as essential services. Essential services example can be water, electricity, even bank accounts nowadays can be considered to be one of the essential services, which is the part that can be linked to the second half of this question paper. And at least one more thing I would like to put here. Equal opportunities for all, irrespective of, let's say, caste, religion, gender, etc. Okay, this is one way to define. You have your own way of defining it. It doesn't matter much, but make sure that most of these things are coming in your definition in one way or the other. The words may be different. It is equally fine. Let's look into some of the keywords here, because that will be guiding us to the answer carefully. One is that it is economic growth. So without economic growth, we cannot have inclusive growth. Let's be clear on it. Economic growth is often referring to the growth in national income, or generally in India, we talk about GDP growth. The GDP growth, that is the first essential requirement for inclusive growth. But not just GDP growth, it should be fairly distributed among the different parts of population. It should be providing not just income fairly, it should be providing the merit goods like education, healthcare, etc., essential services like water and electricity, as well as the equal opportunities. Now, although it is difficult in examination to immediately react in such a manner, but your ideal answer should be such that when you are writing inclusive growth definition and then market economy definition, you should have already in mind that how you can link it when you write the answer, that whether inclusive growth is possible under market economy or not. So you will see that demonstration over here also. Before that, let's talk about market economy. Basically, market economy refers to any kind of economy where we have the production and consumption decisions are driven by the market forces of demand and supply. Some of these things I take up in my very first class in economics, talking about market forces, demand, supply, linking it. But fine, let's talk about what exactly is the requirement over here. The demand supply related production consumption decisions, when that is there in the economy, purely we call it a market economy. In addition, you can say that the role of government is minimum. The role of government in such an economy is as less as possible. Typically, the role of government is restricted to governance, maintaining law and order, and such similar thing. For example, protecting property rights, etc. Other than that, everything is under the private sector, because the demand supply driven decisions are possible only when the private sector is allowed to operate in a free manner. So having discussed both of them, and you have to be again careful about timing, talking about these things quickly, the main question is about whether inclusive growth is possible under market economy or not. Let's start with the fact whether it is possible to have economic growth or not. So one fact you can say that economic growth is possible under market economy. Okay, economic growth is possible under market economy, which is one of the components of inclusive growth, don't forget. How can we say economic growth is possible? Because the market economy often leads to optimal use of the limited resources. When we talk of demand and supply, we mean the demand and supply is determining the resource use, so there is optimal use of limited resources. Therefore, in market economy, there are very less wastages or scarcity. That is the beauty of market economy, that if market economy is taken up in the strict sense, the resources will neither be wasted nor will there be scarcity of it. There is a perfect match between demand and supply, and that is actually a good thing for economic growth. It is telling that with the limited amount of resources, actually the national income can grow faster than maybe in a non-market economy. So this basic feature goes in favor of market economy. But having said that, there are many aspects of economic growth which may not be there, particularly inclusive growth which may not be there. What about fair distribution of income? I hope you are realizing that we are going step by step related to this. This will save your time, make your answer more structured. Okay, I'm not forcing you to use the same structure, but whatever structure you use, say in defining the inclusive growth, a similar structure by structure argument should be coming in the other hand. That shows how systematically you can write the answer briefly in the limited period of time. Okay. So fair distribution of income, is it possible in the market economy led economic growth? Well, yes, it is possible. For that, for the fair distribution of income, we need fair remuneration to all factors of production. Particularly in the factors of production, I am talking about the labor. But fine, factors of production can be others also, land, capital, etc. that most of you know. Basically, if labor is getting their fair remuneration according to their productivity contribution, and there is no other social inequality which is existing, then market economy can lead to fair distribution of income as well. But practically, this is very rare. Even in a developed country, it is very rare that market economy leads to a complete fair distribution of income. Economic growth can still be possible. Therefore, I would say the major part of your answer should talk about those cases where the market economy may not necessarily lead to inclusive growth. And I would suggest the same way that we had discussed the part. Okay, be careful about one thing. We are still doing first part of the question. So in discussion it is taking time, but that is because I am explaining all these things to you. When you are writing down, you have to do it all very quickly. I would say in order to save time, you take the similar cases that we had taken earlier, like fair distribution of income. How can you say that market economy may not necessarily ensure that? Because in a market economy, so you can say may not lead to fair distribution of income in the sense that with market economy often the capital intensive economic activities become more common. Although capital intensive activities may be good for productivity, okay, and there is another question where we'll be talking about these things. But the problem here is that due to being capital intensive, there is a higher income share going to the capitalist class. Those who are earning capital, those who are controlling capital, they get the higher income share, while the lower income share is left for the workers. Something that may not result in the fair distribution of income. So here we are not blaming market economy as such, but the market economy is oriented in such a manner that it rewards capital more beyond a point. And that is what we have seen historically also. Fine, you don't need to write a lot on this because of the limited time and space. What else can be the problems in the market economy in inclusive growth? In a market economy, the merit goods and the essential services which we talked about can be bought more by better off population. Why is that so? Because if we go by the market mechanism in these things, if we go for market mechanism of the merit goods, etc., it often results in higher price. You can give examples also to prove your point. For example, education in open market is very expensive. Look at the fees of the private universities, etc. Essential services like electricity may be very expensive if we actually apply the market mechanism. So if it is only market mechanism, a big proportion of population may not be able to afford these essential services or merit goods at a relatively higher price. Therefore, market economy is not important, as in not essentially leading to the inclusive growth. Merit goods basically here means that the goods which are provided on the basis of merit, as in it will be having a much better impact on economy in future rather than what we can see at this point of time. Like educational reward may not be immediate, but in longer term education can be rewarding for society. So in all these cases, market economy may not be that important or may not lead to inclusive growth. Okay, let's look at what else we had talked about. Equal opportunities. This is one thing. Will it provide equal opportunities? Less likely, particularly in a country like India, where there is a lot of social disparity. So the market economy may not provide equal opportunities as it is not solving the problems like social inequality. Social inequality in the sense that the inequality on the basis of religion, on the basis of caste. In market mechanism, there is nothing as such which will tell that there should be handling of caste-based inequality, religion-based inequality, gender-based inequality, etc. And these are very crucial things for the inclusive growth. So this is another reason why we should be taking care of the fact that market economy may not lead to. I think this is more than enough, given that being a 10 marker and this is also one half of the question, you have to be careful enough to know where you need to stop. Otherwise, one can go on and on herein. Let's go back and see what was the other part of the question. State the significance of financial inclusion in achieving economic growth. Now, it is very likely that you will be confused here in the sense that majority of the times when we talk of the financial inclusion, we often talk about how can inclusive growth be coming through financial inclusion. But be careful. Here they are telling significance of financial inclusion in achieving economic growth, not inclusive growth. Be careful. The significance of financial inclusion in achieving economic growth, not inclusive growth. So here you have to be careful. You have to give those arguments that how financial inclusion can increase the national income growth, and not the arguments that how is it handling disparities or providing other goods. I hope that is getting clear. So let's come back and see how can this be done. In this case, one can talk about, so proceeding further, you have to give the impacts of financial inclusion on economic growth. So you can start this part of answer briefly by telling that financial inclusion is itself a part of inclusive growth, as it is also associated with access to one of the basic essential services, which is the financial services. But this part of question is asking something else. How will financial inclusion impact the economic growth? Let's see what can be some of the ways in which you can answer. So one can be financial inclusion promotes the savings habit. When people have bank accounts, financial inclusion is mainly about having more and more bank accounts, although it is more than that. This question is not giving you much space to go in detail of different financial inclusion related schemes. So be brief. It promotes savings habit because with bank account people tend to save more. Savings habit lead to higher level of deposits with the banks, and higher level of deposits with the banks give them ability to provide or give more loans or create credit. These loans are very crucial for economic growth. Loans are very crucial for economic growth, as particularly the capital expenditures in the economy, the capex or the capital expenditures in the economy is often financed through loans. What kind of expenditures are capital expenditures? For example, the companies, the firms spending on machineries, etc., factories, etc., the government spending on infrastructure, etc., these are all capital expenditure. So, if the financial inclusion is better, the banks get more ability to provide these loans, and hence that is good for economic growth of the country. This, I would say, is one of the major links that you can talk about. But fine, there are other aspects also you can refer to in this case. Like the second way in which it can lead to economic growth is also through the fact that the financial inclusion, particularly among the unorganized sector, improves their potential contribution to economic growth. When we think of unorganized sector, we are thinking of sectors like agriculture, we are thinking of small industries, etc. Majority of them were earlier not associated with the bank accounts, etc. But once they get into the banking system, they have a bank account, they can actually contribute more to economic growth. How is that possible? In that case, unorganized sector can easily get remunerative prices for their produce directly in the bank account. So with a bank account, there is more freedom of selling the goods to the best seller and hence getting remunerative prices. You can give these examples linking it to agriculture. For example, ENAM, although ENAM is altogether a different kind of reform as such in agricultural marketing, but in ENAM, a farmer can benefit not without having a bank account. Because if a farmer is selling his produce to far off state, the bank account is necessary to get that particular remunerative prices. Similarly, there are other things which encourage them. With a bank account, they can get easy loans. So with relatively easy loans, they can contribute to the economic development. And actually, you can think more on it. I'm not going in much detail because in the limited time, you can't write everything again. I think one more feature with which we can finish off this particular answer is, a third way is how financial inclusion can promote economic growth. Financial inclusion also includes certain other benefits. Benefits like insurance, health insurance, life insurance, etc. And other kind of general benefits which are there. So through these benefits, we may have improvements in labor productivity. A question was there separately on it. But if laborers, the workers are getting good social security benefits, that improves their productivity, and that is likely to result in higher economic growth. So these are a few links that you can bring in order to explain how can financial inclusion lead to growth. Well, I stop here on this question, even if, as I told you, there is a lot of scope of writing over here. The more important thing is that you have read the question carefully and answering in the correct direction. Let's go to the next question. So this is question number 3. Question number 3 of paper number 2. Paper 3, I'm sorry, this is 3 of 3. So in this case, they were asking, what are the major challenges of public distribution system in India? How can it be made more effective and transparent? Very straightforward question. There can hardly be other examples of questions that you'll find so straightforward. In fact, our students would find it almost enough to be answered from the class notes itself. But again, we can't do each and everything in detail here. So very quickly I take you through. It's a 10 marker again. Within 150 words you have to talk about all this. So what are the challenges to public distribution system? And then we'll come back to how can it be made more effective and transparent. Actually, to some extent, the challenges to public distribution system in India can be linked to our earlier discussion in paper 2, question number 8, the DBT related challenges, etc. Let's understand that PDS is an example of indirect subsidy. And just by being indirect subsidy, it is easy to handle some of the challenges over here. Let's see. Like one challenge is related to poor targeting. Poor targeting that is reflected in higher PDS leakages. PDS leakages basically mean that what proportion of grains meant for the poor beneficiaries, the genuine beneficiaries, leak out from the system. They actually, the benefits are not going to the genuine beneficiaries, but the benefits leak out. Although there is not a unanimity, but by some rough idea, as much as 45 to 47% is the PDS leakages in India. In simple words, it means more than 45% of the grains do not reach the genuine beneficiaries. Why does that happen? That happens due to the factors like more room for corruption in the form like black marketing. The black marketing of grains is one of the reasons behind it. So the black marketing of food grains means that the grain which was meant for PDS is sold in the open market at a higher price, thereby giving undue benefits to those who are involved in this corruption. And also that part of grain not reaching the genuine household. That is why poor targeting. So black marketing can be one of the issues here. In the same poor targeting itself, you can also talk about the problem of fake ration cards. So due to lacks of fake ration cards present in the Indian PDS, the targeting is again poor. What else can be the challenges that you can refer to? A second challenge that you can refer to is related to higher government burden. Now, government burden is higher for many reasons. One reason is that the food grains are very cheap. So very cheap food grains provided to the beneficiaries. I'm sure while preparing for your prelims, you must have done NFSA. So if you look into the National Food Security Act, the food grain prices are given by a formula called 321 per kg. 3 rupees a kg for rice, 2 rupees a kg for wheat, 1 rupee a kg for coarse grains. Okay, I'm sure most of you would have done it earlier. Now, these prices are extremely lower as compared to the market prices, and bigger the difference between market prices and the PDS prices, higher will be the government burden. The government burden is not just higher due to the cheaper food grains that they are providing, it is also higher due to the fact that government bears other costs. The government has to bear costs like transportation, storage, administration. For example, for running PDS, we need PDS outlets, PDS managers need commission. Okay, so these are administrative costs, supervision costs. There are a few things which are repetitive between the question on DBT and this. So that is also a specific problem in the PDS, that a lot of money spent by government merely on transporting, storing, administrative costs, etc. And that is one of the reasons why PDS is creating problems related to higher fiscal deficit. And finally, other challenge in PDS is related to lack of nutrition security. So far, majority of PDS distribution of grains is of course is of cereal grains only, like rice, wheat and coarse grain, as we have seen here. Many of them may not provide nutritional aspects like protein or vitamins or other micronutrients. That is also something which need to be served. Then one can talk about less freedom of choice. Somewhat similar are these two problems. Freedom of choice here means that people don't have enough choice on what exactly they are going to purchase in terms of food grains. So fine, can't spend too much of time, it's a 10 marks question, you have to come to the other part of it also. So how can it be made more effective and transparent? Ways to make PDS more effective and transparent. One way that it can be made more effective and transparent, actually I would say the major part of reforms here, or the ways of reforms here, is to reduce PDS leakages. If PDS leakages can be reduced, it would automatically make it effective, and generally it will not be reduced unless it is transparent. So major part of your discussion can be around reducing PDS leakages. How can that be reduced? One way can be better governance. In better governance, one can talk about FCI reforms, the way that FCI procures grain, put it in the godowns, distributes it, that needs to be changed. The second thing can be related to role of state governments. The role of state governments in monitoring the food grain movements. Some states have actually done very well. The cases like Chhattisgarh and Madhya Pradesh, these are examples where states have done very well in terms of monitoring the food grain movement. Hence, they have actually reduced their leakages. In governance, we can also talk about something like the PDS outlets operated by community-based institutions. We have seen a lot of positive inputs coming in here when the PDS outlets are operated by the community-based institutions. Like in Tamil Nadu, one of the best PDS in our country is having cooperative societies running the PDS. You can give these examples to show that these are a few things which has happened and these need to be replicated. Chhattisgarh again uses the cooperative societies for distributing the PDS grains. So these are some of the governance reforms that can be talked about. Apart from governance, one can refer to use of better technology. Technology can be a big help in making the process more effective and transparent, like GPS tracking being used for food grain trucks. In Chhattisgarh, particularly, and later in some other states, they have a reform called end-to-end computerization of food grain movements. So these all arguments can be given in the aspects of using better technologies over here. What else can be talked about in this case? One can talk about reducing fake ration cards. And here you can talk about two things. In fake ration card reduction, one is to link it with Aadhaar. Although this experiment has its own pros and cons, it has been quite debatable experiment, because in certain cases without Aadhaar infrastructure the PDS benefits didn't go to the genuine hands. The other way of reducing fake ration cards can be by issuing bar-coded ration cards. The issuance of bar-coded ration cards by the states like Chhattisgarh and now by many other states has been a big reform. So these are all the reforms that you can talk about in this particular case. Okay. Finally, you can also talk about, as the common official aspect goes into it, that in fact this is not just about reducing PDS leakages, but in general introducing DBT in PDS, which is also quite debatable. But the fact remains that whatever DBT comes in, that has its own benefit. You can link it to one of the questions in paper number 2, why the DBT is improvement. You can bring in those arguments that how does it lead to better targeting, how does it keeps the government burden in check. But the reality says that the pilot experiment on DBT and PDS in places like Jharkhand has not been very successful, and where it has been successful also, that issue has come up that the DBT is not adjusted for inflation fully. That is one of the main limitations that we have seen in PDS. So there is a lot of material actually in these kind of questions to be written. According to your time, you can arrange it. Although I would rate this question as one of the easier questions that was being asked in relation to the PDS. Let's come to question number 11, paper number 3, question number 11, which is, I would say, one of the most innovative question that was asked in economics this year. Two parts here. First said, economic growth in recent past has been led by increase in labor productivity. So this is the first part. Explain the statement. So first part simply said that this statement should be explained over here. And then the second part said that the second part basically was about suggest the growth pattern that will lead to creation of more jobs without compromising labor productivity. Now, possibly some of you would remember that in class when I did employment part, somewhere in the solutions to the Indian employment problem, I talked about the link between productivity and job creation. But this question was a slight surprising one because this question has more orientation towards formal economic theory like economics optional paper. Yet you have a lot of argument that you can give even from the GS point of view. Now, I would say one issue in this question was when they said recent past, there was no clarity given how recent, as in last few years or maybe last decade or maybe last few decades. It is very difficult to get. Although if you strictly talk about it, the statement is not even referring to India. In the first part, they may be, even in second part, they are not, but in both the parts, India is not being mentioned. But fine, given that this is mostly the Indian economy related question, we should be keeping that Indian economy in mind. In any case, it is difficult to recall each and everything related to Indian economy, labor productivity, leave alone the other economy. So we'll focus on Indian economy, definitely. And when I say recent past, I would say it is better to take a last few decades. You get more scope to write. Why am I telling you that? Is also because labor productivity in last few years, if you say take 5-6 years, it has fluctuated a lot. It has gone down, it has come up again. So to get a formal trend between labor productivity and growth within last 3-4 years is difficult, if not impossible. Hence, I would suggest that take this question in the context of a last few decades. I would say 1991 can be a good transition which you can talk about. How can you take such a question while answering? What you should be thinking about? Again, I'm just telling you one way to answer it. It may not be the only way, as I often refer to. Definitely, you should begin with the meaning of labor productivity. And let's also not forget that this was to be answered in 250 words. So you had more space and somewhat more time available to answer this. Labor productivity in a general sense is referring to the value of output of goods and services per unit of labor in the economy. Although in another version of the definition, rather than labor, we say labor hour, which is also okay. Strictly speaking, we should talk in terms of labor hour. But what happens when we look into the overall labor productivity in all sectors, say agriculture including, it is sometimes not possible to get more exact labor hour. So even if you write per unit of labor, it is fine. The value of goods and services output is more or less the GDP, the national income of the economy. Okay, now how to approach this question? One way to approach this question is to look into how can economic growth happen? Okay, after all, if you go to the roots of economic growth, how can economic growth happen? One way to have economic growth is, or one way to interpret the process of economic growth is, taking two things into account. One, increase in the number of units of factors of production employed. What are factors of production? Factors of production are typically given as land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship, etc. So during your prelims, you may have done the concepts like circular flow of income, where we say that when the factors of production are employed in greater quantity, they also generate more production, and in return they get the factor income. So this is one way. The other way can be by increase in productivity of the factor of production. Productivity of the factors of production, FOPs, factors of production. So either increase factors of production in number, quantity, like in land you can say bring more area under cultivation, more labor being employed, etc., more machines being added, or increase in productivity. Now, as the economy goes through higher and higher GDP growth, gradually the first component becomes less and less important. The reason is that many a times some of these factors are by nature scarce, like land is scarce. Labor may not be scarce in a country like India. We are a highly populous country. But even in India, skilled labor may not be that freely available. In developed countries, even labor can be scarce. Capital is scarce in a country like India due to problems in financing capital. And entrepreneurship is like a risk-taking activity aspect, which depends a lot on the kind of education, skill development, or other such things which people are having, and certain subjective issues related to the risk-taking. All in all, the major productivity, the major part of growth over a period of time comes from increase in productivity. Now look at this question. Why am I doing all this with you? Because this question is about labor productivity. I would say you can put this entire question in a historical perspective that will give the examiner a way that you can actually read through labor productivity, the history of Indian economy in the recent decades. If you talk about Indian economy pre-1991, you will see that there was major role of agriculture in economic growth. Okay. Major role of agriculture in economic growth in the sense that roughly 1/3 of GDP or even more than that kept on coming until 1991 from agriculture. Now, how will agriculture achieve growth? Growth in agriculture or economic growth in agriculture can be linked to one, increase in area under cultivation. Can you see? It's like repeating what we were discussing on the last page. By increasing the number of units of factors of production, by bringing more and more area under cultivation, we can increase the agricultural growth. The other is increase in agricultural productivity. How can agricultural productivity be increased? Mainly by improving land productivity. Although there are other ways, but it was mainly by increasing the productivity of land. And that is where suddenly the entire green revolution reading will come in your mind. Basically, green revolution was based on the claim that area under cultivation cannot be increased beyond a point. Land is scarce. So improve the productivity of land by bringing better technology, better inputs, etc. And that is why the growth, economic growth in India during 1970s and 80s, okay, during 70s, 80s, which is quite past, was mainly driven by productivity of land. Even if to some extent labor productivity was rising, that was not the major cause of growth. Then came 1991 BOP crisis, the reforms after 91, and post 1991, if you talk sector wise, then there was the main roles of industries and services. The industries and services acquired bigger role in economic growth. Let's not forget, whatever you are writing, your idea should be that what question is being asked. The question was being asked, I'm still doing first part of question, by the way. The question is being asked that in recent past, labor productivity is leading to economic growth. Industries and services are more capital intensive sectors by nature compared to agriculture. Even in agriculture, capital is employed, but not as much as in the industrial sector. But at the same time, both industries and services, you can say, despite dependence on capital, needed skilled labor to operate capital. Okay, so even if capital was there, skilled labor was needed to operate the capital. So for example, in the automobile manufacturing units, they needed skilled laborers to work at the factory. In the services like modern services, say IT, etc., you can give examples actually here. Industries, you can give examples like automobiles or pharmaceuticals, which became very, very important industries. Then in services, you can talk about information technology enabled services, banking, finance, etc. So all these sectors were more dependent on capital, but that doesn't mean labor became less important. Rather, in post 1991 time period, what India saw was more of capital deepening economic growth. Capital deepening economic growth means labor got equipped with more capital. Hence, increase in labor productivity. So the statement is correct in that sense that in the entire post-91 time period, the labor productivity has been higher because labor got equipped with more and more capital. Okay, the other thing to note here is that when we talk about capital deepening growth in industries, there we are talking more about physical capital. Even if human capital is needed, physical capital became more important, as in the automobile sector, we need those laborers who can work on certain machineries or in certain factories. They needed skills. With the capital deepening progress in the services, the role of human capital also became important. So the labor productivity has increased, both because more and more laborers are skilled enough to work on physical capital, plus they had more and more human capital. By the way, I don't mean that in industries human capital is not needed. It is needed there also. So in the realistic sense, a combination of human and physical capital both are needed for economic growth when the growth is led by the industries and services. And that is where the labor productivity plays a very important role. So you can say that this is the meaning of the statement overall, that post 1991, the services sector, the industries sector became more important, the labor productivity also increased. And you can finish the first part of the question by giving some recent trends. In recent trends, you can say that labor productivity has increased in the last decade, but with fluctuations. Well, ideally you should give some data, but in a GS paper, we don't expect that students would have gone through so much detailed data on labor productivity. So I don't think you should worry much about data. But if you have done some broader readings of the economy, you should be aware that there has been fluctuation, and that is what also explains fluctuations in economic growth. In fact, that will give a more weightage to your answer that economic growth is dependent on labor productivity. I hope you are understanding that when labor productivity fluctuates, the economic growth is also fluctuating. Hence, labor productivity is definitely playing a role in economic growth. I think that is enough on the first part of the answer if you write properly. By the way, while you are using the timing, you can also use the timing of post-2000, 2001 time, when services sector actually outperformed the industries. And that is where the role of labor productivity became even more important. Second part was asking, okay, let's go back to question once again. The second part of this question was asking, suggest the growth pattern that will lead to creation of more jobs without compromising labor productivity. This is very interesting part. So let's talk about some of the ways in which there can be more job creation but without compromising the labor productivity. And here you can use a lot of material that you may have done in relation to employment discussion. In fact, at least I can assure that whoever had attended my classes on employment would easily get a lot of material on this. So let's begin. What are the ways to get to create more jobs without sacrificing the labor productivity? Let's talk about some of the common ways in which it can be done. One way that it can be done is through the better education and skill development among labor force in agriculture. Actually, many of you would have ignored agriculture here, but according to me, agriculture is very, very important even now for Indian economy. In fact, agricultural labor force should be better educated and skill development. Why am I telling you this? Simply because whether we want or not, agriculture will remain a very crucial sector and a labor intensive sector. So it is always better idea to provide better skills or provide better degree of education to them so that they become more productive and they contribute to agriculture in a more productive manner. Green revolution was about land being more productive, technology being made more suitable. But in a modern agriculture now, the role of labor in agriculture is equally important. Let's not forget that. And this can become one of the unique points, I'm sure, if you write about as comparison to the other students. Then you can talk about promotion of some labor intensive sectors which are not just labor intensive but productive as well. Normally we think that labor intensive sectors are not productive, but there are sectors which are the labor intensive as well as productive. I'll give you at least few examples here. One can be allied sectors. So I can elaborate the way that you write. Allied sectors like dairy, poultry, etc. These are the sectors which can be both labor intensive and productive. Then you can talk about non-farm rural sectors. For example, here you can talk about the rural food processing units or rural handicraft industry, etc. The best part of this is this can improve productivity in the rural sector without undue pressure on agriculture and allied sector. The non-farm rural sector should be promoted. And definitely a very important role is of the labor intensive industries. Promoting the labor intensive industries. Examples like textiles. Along with textiles, you can also talk about the apparel industry, leather industry, shoemaking industry related to it, food processing industry. There are a number of examples that you can give about industries which are both labor intensive as well as productive. What else can you talk about? One solution that you can give is bringing down mismatch between desired and available skills, particularly in industries. Although this applies also for services, but I would say more crucially for the industries. Basically, by mismatch between desired and available skills, we mean there are many people who are skilled in terms of going to a particular institution and acquiring that, but their available skill set is different from what is desirable in the industries. And how can this be removed? Actually, you can give a number of ways. I would say, for example, one way to have this is by better government corporate, you can say link in skill development. For example, government can provide funding for skill development that is actually provided by the corporates, by the industrialists, etc. Why this is unique? Because then the available and desired skills will be matching. The actual productivity of labor will be higher without sacrificing job creation. So keep in mind, every time you have to also justify that it is increasing productivity without harming the job creation. You can talk about a number of other features. Since this was a 250 words, I'm talking a lot more about it, and definitely you can add more into this. One argument can be related to diversification of the modern services. Modern services have been very helpful for India in achieving higher economic growth as well as job creation. But the time has come that we should diversify beyond just IT sector or ITES and go into the other areas. Such a diversification will create productive jobs, because services are generally more labor intensive as compared to the capital intensive industries. So it will create productive jobs on one hand. Let's not forget, modern services have also been crucial for exports. Why this point is so important? When we say a sector is crucial for exports, then just domestic production is not the limit to create GDP and employment. When something can be used for exports, then we are like raising the bar of the growth as well as the employment contribution from that sector. You can talk about labor reforms here, particularly those labor reforms that can ensure, that can give flexibility to industries while they are hiring, flexibility to industry in hiring the workers, that will increase the jobs, along with ensuring labor welfare. Labor welfare means what? Read more on labor laws, you will understand that. Ensuring labor welfare will mean providing them minimum wages, providing them social security benefits like provident funds or other pension benefits, ensuring their safety at the workplace. These all things also improve productivity of labor. When the labor is safe at the workplace, when the labor is getting social security, that improves their productivity without impacting the job creation. So labor reforms can also be used very smartly over here. And I would say one last argument, definitely you can add more than this, can be related to okay, let's go to another page. Promotion of the unorganized sector. there is a lot of both growth and employment potential in the unorganized sector of India. The unorganized sector of India has a lot more potential to contribute both to economic growth and jobs. So by promoting unorganized sector, as in by providing them easy loans, by providing them infrastructure, etc., we can encourage more job creation in these sectors. Fine, unorganized sector jobs may not be as productive as organized sector. Okay, so you may see this as a counter argument. However, let's understand that there is a saturation point in organized job creation. We cannot have all jobs in the organized sector. So it is better idea to create productive jobs even in unorganized sector so that it can contribute to growth, job creation without sacrificing the labor productivity. I think if you take these things in mind and a few more things which you can add, this will be giving you more than enough space to write the answer like this. Okay. So with this, I end on the paper discussion. These are the questions which I had to discuss.
So guys, this is question number 4. Elaborate the scope and significance of food processing industry in India. Again, this is of 150 words. This question has been directly asked from the syllabus itself. Now, how do we answer such a question? Guys, see, there are 2 words mentioned. We should first understand what is the difference between scope and significance. This question is saying discuss the scope of food processing industry. The scope of food processing industry means that if we are saying that India should have a food processing industry, first of all, what's a food processing industry? An industry which converts agricultural raw material into high valued items. Like if you take tomatoes, you can convert it into tomato ketchup. If you take potatoes, you can convert it into potato chips. Now, scope of food processing industry means that if we want to have food processing industry, what are the factors that exist in India which can help us to have a food processing industry? All the factors which can help us to have it, right? So that is called as a scope. I can give you some examples. Like India has raw material. We have a lot of tomatoes, potatoes, onions, rice, wheat, cereals. So raw material is available. Similarly, labor force is available. So what are those factors which will help us to have food processing industry? That's called scope. Now, once we have a food processing industry, what are the advantages that India will get out of it is called significance. So for example, it will provide employment, it will give us food security, it will increase our exports. These are the advantages we will have after having food processing industry. This is called significance. So the factors which will help us to build a food processing industry is called scope, and whatever advantages we are going to have once we have a food processing industry is called significance. So now let us answer this question. To answer this question, we need to write a powerful introduction first. And what should we write in the introduction? Very precise things. Example, you can have different types of introduction. One of the type of introduction could be that Indian food processing industry is one of the top 10 in the world. Indian food processing industry is a sunrise industry. The meaning of sunrise industry is those industries who are yet to achieve their full potential, which means there is a huge scope, but we have not been able to achieve the full potential. Hence, it is important. And we can also mention that looking at the importance of food processing industry, Government of India has given special place to it in the Atmanirbhar Bharat package through a scheme called Production Linked Incentive Scheme. So this is very crucial. Now, then we can write one line that under food processing industries, raw food are converted into high valued food. Just one line, because it is not asking what is food processing. So we'll just write one line. This could be our introduction. Now, we must write what is the scope of food processing industry in India. What is the scope of food processing industry? So I told you scope means what are the factors which can help India to have a food processing industry. Now guys, imagine that I want to start an industry which will convert tomatoes into tomato ketchup. What are the 2 things I need? First, I need raw material like tomatoes, I need workers, I need machine, I need money, right? These are called supply side factors. Once I create tomato ketchup, I need somebody to buy my product. So in the economy, there must be people who would demand my product. That are called demand side factors. So scope can be of two types: supply side factors, demand side factors. If both the factors exist in the economy, an industry will succeed. So why do you think India can have a successful food processing industry? Because we have supply side factors, means inputs, and there is demand for the product. So this is the scope. Let us see what are the supply side factors related to food processing industry. So we have huge agroclimatic zones. Agroclimatic zones means you have variety of climate which gives us the power and capacity to have variety of agricultural crops. In fact, if you talk about any general crop, rice, wheat, cereals, fruits, vegetables, sugar, milk, India's global rank in the production of those items is either 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5. India is top 5 in the production of most of the agricultural commodities. Why? Because we have a variety of soil, variety of climate, we have rain, temperature variation. Because of these things, these are called agroclimatic zone. India has a lot of raw material. Similarly, India has long coastline, which means fisheries is also possible. So because of these two, we have raw material for industries. There is no dearth of people. India is a country of 145 crore people. So we have no scarcity of labor force. Now, Government of India also provides support to food processing industry through programs like Mega Food Park, formalization of micro food processing enterprises. So under Mega Food Park, the government supports big food processing industries. Under FME, government supports small micro food processing industries. Production linked incentive government has started so that India starts to export more food, processed food outside India. And Sampada is an umbrella scheme related to food processing. Operation Green is a scheme to support farmers to give raw material to industries. So, and also to give income support to farmers. So these are some of the schemes which have been started by Government of India related to food processing. And under these schemes, government provides money, capital, government provides facilities for production and export to our food processing industries. So what are the supply side factors, which means inputs? We have raw material, we have labor, we have government support, which means money is given by government, subsidy is given by government. These are supply side factors. So once we give input to the industry, industry converts the input to output. So let us see who demands the output. So India is undergoing rapid urbanization. See, when India is going urbanization, what are the features of India's urban class? The features of India's urban class is we have a young population. And young population is very experimental in nature. So we try to experiment more with new food, processed food. We have a huge middle class and we have nuclear families, which means these days, if you look at the composition of the family, both husband and wife would work, right? Which means that they don't have time for cooking. So they mostly rely on ready to eat food, which is processed food. So the nature of urbanization is such that we rely more on processed food. Taste and preference, guys. You know, a research was done by Dr. Angus Deaton, who won a Nobel Prize also in economics. He said that over last 30-40 years, the taste and preference in developing countries, including India, have undergone a change. Earlier, the developing countries, including India, they were eating more of rice, wheat and cereals. But now, the developing countries, including India, prefer more of fruits, vegetables and protein. And if you want to have fruits, vegetables and protein, you have to increase their life. How do you increase their life? Through food processing. So since taste and preference of people have become more oriented towards fruits, vegetable and protein, hence who would provide these things? Food processing industry. So there is a scope of food processing industry. There is also export potential of processed food of India, because Indian processed food is of low price and high quality. So guys, what is the scope? If somebody will ask to discuss the scope of food processing industry in India, you should say supply side factors are there, which means inputs are there. Demand side factors are there, which means when the product is ready, there will be demand. So two scopes. Now, what is the significance? I told you the meaning of significance is once we have a food processing industry, how will it help India? Let's see. If we have a food processing industry, it will help us to reduce our post-harvest losses. You know, out of entire agricultural production in India, roughly 30 to 40% is wasted. Now, our level of food processing is less than 15%. Means out of total food, we process less than 15%. Developed countries like USA, they process almost 65 to 70% of their food. They are able to save it, but we waste a lot of food in India. In fact, according to one committee called Dalwai Committee, roughly there was a loss of 92,000 crore worth of food grains in India 3-4 years back. So we waste a lot of food. If we use it to convert it into something better, then we will be able to save this 30 to 40% food. And given the fact that the global hunger index rank of India is so bad, which means in India, even today people are dying because of lack of food. We can convert this 30%, 40% food which we are throwing and wasting, we can convert it into processed food and give it to the population to save their life. Improving farmers' income. In India, the tragedy of Indian farmers is most of the farmers are not rich in India. 86% of the farmers are small and marginal. When there is bumper production, they don't get good prices. So they throw away the prices and sometimes they commit suicide. If we have food processing industry, it can buy the crops of the farmer and it can give good money to the farmers. So it can save farmers' life. It can reduce farmers' suicide also. That point also we can write here. Contribution in economic growth. Let us look at some data. Basic data can be given in the answer of GS paper 3. So what is the contribution of food processing industry in India's total gross value added? 1.7%. What is the contribution of food processing industry in manufacturing gross value added? 10%. So 10% of our manufacturing income comes from food processing industry. 10% of our agricultural income comes from food processing industry. That's their contribution. Now, out of our total exports, more than 10% is contributed by food processing industry. It's a decent contribution, double-digit contribution. Similarly, what is the contribution of food processing industry in employment? Look at this, guys. Food processing industry comprises of 3 steps. Primary processing, where what we do is we take tomatoes, we wash it with water, etc. So here machines are not used, mostly people are used. So in primary processing, people are used. The second type of food processing is secondary processing. What is secondary processing? You take tomatoes and you remove the top layer, you peel the layer and you crush the tomatoes and convert it into paste. Here also we mostly use labor force and less machine. So it is labor intensive. So primary processing labor intensive, secondary processing labor intensive. What is tertiary processing? Third step of food processing. In tertiary processing, we convert the tomato paste into tomato ketchup by adding color and flavor. There also we use a lot of people. So in food processing industry, we use a lot of labor. So it is called labor intensive industry. Given the fact that India has a lot of population, we should promote these kind of industries. Look at the contribution of food processing industry in employment. More than 10% of our total employment comes from food processing industry. Similarly, guys, that Indian agriculture has a problem of disguised unemployment. In Indian agriculture, if 10 people are required for farming, 100 people work in the farming, same agricultural field, which means extra 90 workers are working. Those extra 90 workers can be absorbed in food processing industry because food processing industry is highly labor intensive. Now, similarly, guys, if we can save the food wastage here and we can convert it into something better, it will help in India's food security also, which is very, very crucial. So food security and nutritional security can be ensured using food processing industry. So these are the significances that we should have written in the exam. You did not write a lot of data. Some basic data was good enough for this exam. For example, in post-harvest losses, we can take the name of Dalwai Committee. Similarly, when we were doing scope and significance, in taste and preference, we could have taken some names of the Nobel laureates also. So these are some of the things which will help us to make our answer better. You could conclude this answer by saying that food processing industry holds immense scope and significance for India, but it is also facing challenges related to lack of infrastructure and lack of funds, plus lack of modern technology, some basic technology in food processing industry. For example, we don't have much warehouses, cold storage, lack of electricity is there. Our farmers are not trained in right use of preservatives. So research and development related to food processing industry is missing in India. These are the things that we can write in the conclusion and say that government needs to take care of these problems like infrastructure, research and development, cold storage, warehouses, farmers training, preservatives. It will make our industry prosper in a fast-paced manner. Thank you.